Hello, people around the world. Welcome to the finals of Grand Prix Copenhagen. The format is standard, but the format specifically for these finals appears to be which red deck is best, because it's red-black Chain Whirler in the hands of Francisco Sanchez up against our #1 seed on mono-red aggro. That is Tobias Mara, and we will see whether or not he's going to be able to make the most of being on the play based on being #1 seed, kicking things off with a Bomat Courier. That pretty much the ideal start.
Right. Tobias Mara here, the more aggressive deck. More lands are untapped in the mono-red deck, and that way he can much easier get underneath Francisco. Francisco, however, having the more powerful late game where more of his top decks are more powerful. He has cycling lands, and he has just more powerful cards in cards such as Scrappy Scrounger that comes back later in the game, Unlicensed Disintegration, etc. However, Tobias has all of these creatures that are bad against Goblin Chain Whirler, where Francisco has fewer of them, but that lets him easier cast Hazard the Fairwind, which he of course had 4 of in this deck, which is the premier card in the matchup.
So Sanchez there playing a turn 2 Bomat Courier in the hope of trading off the little post bugs. Earthshaker Kenra said, no, that's not going to work out too well for you there, Francisco. I'm just going to make it so your creature can't block. Attack on in. You're at 16. I'm at 20. How do you feel about that? And Sanchez here, Dragon Cell Summit on the second turn. So his mana already close to being pretty much sorted. But I'm looking at his hand, and it feels surprisingly slow. In other matchups, having your turn 1 drop into your Heart of Kieran, into your Unlicensed Disintegration on turn 3 seems incredible. Right here, though, he's facing down Tobias Mora, who on turn 3 has 2 creatures attacking at least, and there's a very real chance that some sort of removal spell will come along, meaning that there's not even any blockers for either of the creatures that are coming in from Mara here.
Yeah, it seems like both players are gonna be able to survive the Chain Whirler test. If Tobias Mara has it here after casting that Earthshaker Kenra, forcing Bomat Courier through, he's very, very much advantage. I don't think Francisco has a Chain Whirler either. Neither do I think he has a third land drop. So that means Tobias with the great curve does get to be ahead early here if it has an answer for this big Heart of Kieran that may block next turn. Or is that a Goblin Chain Whirler being drawn?
There's a Goblin Chain Whirler in hand, but unfortunately I don't believe that there's a third land to help cast it. It may be that Sanchez has to content himself with holding mana back to be able to potentially play some instant speed interaction here. If it works out that Bomat Courier is getting killed off at this point, though, it may be that Mara happy enough to just draw 3 cards here as we see a Braid targeting the little male bug as it attacks in here.
Interesting enough, Francisco, too scared of something like an Abrade, elects not to play a Scrappy Scrounger to be able to crew the Heart of Kieran, instead going for the safe option of Abrade. However, it is going to punish him here because I don't think Tobias has the removal for the Heart of Kieran, and that would have been a problem otherwise. And instead casts a Rekindling Phoenix post-combat, which is looking really good on this board.
We are in one of those funny situations where one player has all the lands, the other really none at all. And the way that that tends to go is that either the player without very many lands succumbs comparatively quickly, or when they draw out of not having enough lands, they suddenly have an absolute powerhouse of a collection of cards.
This is an important turn. If Francisco does not hit an untapped land there, I think that was a Canyon Slew, and you can see the Black Splash really punishing Francisco here. If he could have cast a Goblin Chain Whirler on this turn and dealt with both the Egg Elemental and the Earthshaker Kenra, he could have come back into this game, but without that happening and the Heart of Kieran just trading for naught, it's gonna be, I think, almost impossible to climb himself back here.
There are some matchups where looking at life totals doesn't really give you the full story as to who's winning or losing. I would not say that this matchup is one of them. The life totals currently 11 to 17, and with these attacks going to go even more lopsided in Tobias Mara's favour here. The #1 seed, he's drawn if anything, slightly more lands than he really wants, but that means that he's been able to get his threats down as and when he needs to, and Rekindling Phoenix still on the battlefield is a bit of a problem for Francisco Sanchez here. He's potentially facing lethal on this very next turn.
I like the way Francisco's playing this. He's not training with Earthshaker and Kenra, and he's leaving up Okay, I would have actually liked Francisco not to block here, because if he doesn't block, he can disintegrate the Phoenix, follow up with a Shame Whirler next turn. Oh, he didn't get punished by Tobias Maurer having any kind of removal, and the Prowess Trigger would actually take care of that Earthshaker Kenra. But the thing that he could have done is just taken the Earthshaker Kenra, let Goblin Shame Whirler deal with that Earthshaker Kenra, and then he would have had 2 blockers for sure, even though it's eternalized. But he did in the end get punished by the Goblin Shame Whirler, not a removal. And even if he goes for the Goblin Shame Whirler this turn, the eternalized is going to punish him here. Instead, he could have had 2 blockers being back.
Yeah, right now, 0 blockers available for Francisco Sanchez. That Scrap Heap Scrounger cannot block, can't really attack into the face of a 3/3 first striker either, meaning that the best it can do is power up an unlicensed disintegration right now.
Right. Yeah, this is just going to be too tough for Francisco. He had his little window there to come back when he blocked with Heart of Kiran, and I think that block was correct back then, because you gotta play, you gotta play to your odds to come back when you're in such a deficit, trying to hit that untapped land source, but he didn't, and the Phoenix is just too powerful when it comes back and attacking.
And ultimately, Francisco sees the writing on the wall, decides to go on to Game 2. Hopefully he'll get a better set of draws for Game 2, and indeed Game 3 if he wants to win this title.
Right. So this I don't think the matchup changes a ton post-board, except that Tobias can take out a few of his cards that dies to Goblin Shame Whirler, while trying to keep his curve low, making Hazard still as good. However, I'm gonna look here at Francisco's sideboard. He has 1 Hour of Glory, so that's a good way to deal with those 4 Hazards in Tobias Maurer's deck. He also has 1 Abrade probably going in, EDC Harvester, 2 Chandra's Defeat, and 2 Glorybringers, Siege Game Commander, as well as a land. So it's going to be still close corners post-sideboard here.
I mean, I guess that the one thing to me about how this matchup was always going to go is whoever won that Game 1 puts them in a really great position. And that's obviously not just because, well, you only need to win 1 of the remaining 2 to win the match, but also because if it does end up going to a Game 3, you're going to be the one that's on the play. So even though in principle splitting the first 2 games, it's essentially pretty even, being on the play so valuable in this matchup that whoever won Game 1 even more favoured than they might otherwise be.
Yeah, it's just if you're on the play from the red-black Shame Whirler side, it's much easier to make cards like Heart of Kiran way more powerful, as being on the draw sometimes it can be awkward to still try to leave up removal for your opponent's onslaught, as well as trying to crew that Heart of Kiran. That becomes a lot easier on the play. From the mono-red aggro side, being on the play, well, of course being on the play is great always, but especially when you're trying to attack with Hazard as quickly as possible, not having that extra card in your hand can actually be an upside for the aggro deck.
So Chandra's defeats on both sides, I'm sure, going to be a big hallmark of what's happening after sideboarding. Here, of course, the mono-red list, a little bit more simplistic in its sideboarding, doesn't have as many colours to work with, but doesn't mean it's necessarily that much less powerful. And we saw the power of consistency in Game 1, because ultimately, if Francisco Sanchez had just had, like, let's imagine that Sanchez's list was mono-red, it's just that, so all of his lands come into play untapped, he never has any mana issues, and if that had been the case, I think that Francisco could easily have won that game.
Yeah, it would have definitely be a lot closer, that's for sure. And the game would have been gone even further down the line, definitely. I mean, there's no surprises here, given that they have the deck list, but either way, you can see the sideboards being constructed as they anticipate what the other players are taking in. We see Chandra's Defeat, as Tim was talking about, being fantastic in this matchup, because it helps you break serve, because you can double spell dealing with important threats a lot easier. And we see this powerful Chandra's Defeat the anti-red card instead of something like Magma Spray that would have been fantastic in something like Scrap Heap Scrounger, etc. Or even being able to kill Bowman's Courier because of Glorybringer. Both players know they bring in Glorybringer from both sides, and since there is more efficient removal post-board, the games tend to go a little bit longer, and that's why Glorybringer is good.
as if there needed to be any explanation as to why Glory was good. We get the little extra bonus feature when you've got someone sat next to you who's won a Pro Tour with a red deck.
Yep.
Turns out there's a little bit of extra insight for you. All part of the price of entry on this GP here.
Yeah, the big difference between back then and now is that the high end of the red decks are so powerful that it's more important to hit those Phoenixes, Hazarets, and Glorybringers earlier. Classically, in the mono red mirror, the removals, aka the burn spells, are so efficient with dealing with the creatures that it tends to go for a longer game. And that's why you sometimes want to be in the draw in this matchup. However, that's not the case when we're dealing with the likes of, as I said, Hazoret, Glorybringer, and even Rekindling Phoenix.
All right, looks like these players just about ready to kick things off. Francisco Sanchez just taking a good hard look at his opening hand here. He's going to be on the play on this game too, I would imagine. There's been other formats where it's been suggested that the red decks, especially in the mirror, the value of the extra card is worth it to be on the draw, but that doesn't look like likely to be the case in this particular standard environment.
All right, so Francisco not having a 1-drop, and this Soulscar Mage, it might look innocent, but it's really good in this matchup. Not only is it good at blocking in this matchup, it's also a 1-drop that doesn't die to Goblin Chainwhirler and works very well with Goblin Chainwhirler. If it becomes some kind of a race where there's not a ton of creature, putting a minus counter on all of your opponent's creatures is just huge in this matchup. And once more, Francisco Sanchez is missing land drops.
Yeah, we saw a cut. At that point, things looking good. But Aethersphere Harvester, this one of the cards that, again, is very potent. The numbers stack up very, very nicely against Goblin Chainwhirler. 3/5 means that even with an extra point being thrown around somewhere, which does happen quite a bit in this format, still able to fight against a first striking 3/3, fly over, gain some life, all those great things. And Goblin Chainwhirler, Tobias Mora here, doesn't need to wait around for extra targets to get dealt 1 damage, because 1 damage as it comes in, cruising Aethersphere Harvester, gets to attack in. Yes, there's the unlicensed disintegration, but without the bonus, and it's taking the energy off that Ether Hub, meaning that, at least for now, Francisco Sanchez, in addition to any other concerns he might have, doesn't have any black mana.
Right, you're completely right, Francisco. Honestly, I would have liked Tobias not to crew that Aethersphere Harvester when he played it on turn 3, and Francisco did not upgrade it end of turn. Tobias pretty much knows for sure there's no upgrade in hand, and Francisco kind of has to cast that unlicensed integration regardless at the end of turn to be able to keep up, since it's missing land drops. So if he makes sure this Aethersphere Harvester gets in an attack or 2 before dying to something like an unlicensed integration, I think that's there's some value to be gained there.
Chandra's defeat dealing with a second copy of Goblin Chainwhirler. Sanchez here still in a rough spot when it comes to mana, because not only does he not have black mana, he doesn't have triple red either, having to rely on just using removal spells to deal with each threat that comes down. But there are more and more threats coming from Tobias Mora here. Carry Zev, Skyship Raider coming along. That will be a fiddly one to block, and we can see from the hand of Tobias Mora that when he does hit that 4th and 5th mana, he has a lot of action.
He does indeed. We joked around in testing that a lot of us didn't like Aether Hubs in this deck, and we joked around saying that, oh, luckily people are playing Aether Hub, so Chainwhirler doesn't become too good because it kind of restricts it, meaning you can only cast 1 Goblin Chainwhirler whenever you draw too many Aether Hubs. And we can see that here. Francisco Sanchez does have a Goblin Chainwhirler in hand, and he just simply can't cast it on this board.
I mean, as things stand, the one slight reprieve for Sanchez is that it's now Tobias Mora who's a little bit light on mana. As soon as he hits 4, he's going to be able to cast Chandra. As soon as he hits 5, he has more big threats in there. But in the meantime, the first glory bringer of the game is for Francisco Sanchez. It takes down Karizev Skyship Raider. No creatures on the battlefield now for Tobias Mora, and he takes a reasonable chunk of damage on that attack.
Right, and luckily for Tobias, he did get his 4th land now, and now he just has a full host of cards he can cast there. I think he has multiple Chandras in hand, as well as Rekindling Phoenix being able to be a safe crew for that Aethersphere Harvester. And Francisco really has to step on the brakes here a little bit and try to deal with whatever Tobias is doing here, because he's not racing that harvester clearly, and yeah, that's just the way it is. His only option is to stay back and try to deal with harvester, Phoenix. It's going to be a tough thing to do here.
So Solskjaer Mage getting a hit in here, but just a single point, and the Aethersphere Harvester will soon gain that all back. But a lot of mana available for Francisco Sanchez here, and there are a number of very good sideboard cards that cost the slightly higher amounts of mana. The curve often goes up for these lists after sideboarding. On occasion, you'll see an extra land sideboarded in. So something like a Siege Gang Commander, for example, that's the one that we see coming down here. Often one of the good things about Siege Gang Commander, while it would seem like those goblins are just ripe to be chain-whirled away, by the time that the commander comes down, already a bunch of chain-whirlers have been cast, and that's exactly what's happened here. 2 of them already in Tobias Mara's graveyard, meaning less concern with them all being wiped out in one fell swoop. And if Francisco Sanchez gets to untap with all of that mana, all of those goblins in play, he's threatening a lot of damage here.
He is definitely. I think Tobias Maurer has a pretty straightforward way to win this game, unless he's afraid of a Chandra's defeat from Francisco Sanchez. I believe he has both 2 Chandras and a Glorybringer in hand. So if he goes for Glorybringer, crewing the Aethersphere Harvester, he can attack with both the Harvester and Rekindling Phoenix for a full 7 amount of damage, and then next turn finish off Francisco with the plus ability from Chandra. And I think it's correct to attack with Harvester and Rekindling Phoenix instead of Glorybringer, because that plays around the potential Chandra's defeat a little bit better.
Can't he just play Chandra, crew the Aethersphere Harvester with Chandra, then tick up Chandra?
No, this is no Heart of Kira.
Oh, of course it's not. Sorry.
I know we've seen it a lot on camera, but this is a little bit more unique Harvester. Cannot be crewed by Planeswalkers.
All right, so here does come. It's a 5-drop. There's not too many of them in these red decks. It's Glorybringer. Glorybringer can't shoot down another Glorybringer.
All right, so we'll see if he plays around. If he plays around the Chandra's defeat here or not. There's actually a lot of options here for Tobias. I mean, if he gets to attack with Glorybringer, actually what Tobias can do is he can say, okay, I want to go to combat. And most likely Francisco will have to deal with that Glorybringer before he goes to combat with a Chandra defeat, if he so has it. And if he does, he can crew the Aethersphere Harvester to still get in for 7 points of damage.
An attack and exert on Siege Gang Commander doesn't look too happy for Francisco Sanchez here.
Yeah, so Tobias can kind of lure out the information without actually giving any advantage out. And by killing also the Siege Gang Commander, there's just way lower chance that Francisco can get Tobias on the crackback here. And
1 point of life left for Francisco Sanchez. That Spire of Industry, it's not tapping for black mana anytime soon.
It's not.
For a variety of reasons. No artifacts in play. Even if there were, he is stranded being a mono red deck with slightly worse lands, I guess. And looking on at a whole host of different ways that he could be losing this game. 1 life, his opponent on a full 16, and you can see him desperately trying to figure out if there's a way he can stay in this game here.
Yeah, I think Francisco is just going to hope that Tobias literally has blank cards in his hand, but he knows that there's not lands, because Tobias has missed a couple of land drops this game, and he knows Tobias has spells in hand. He just got to hope that those are not spells that can actually deal with that is direct damage, and it cannot produce additional attackers to get Francisco down. I'll be impressed if he comes back from this situation. The way that Francisco could come back is if he casts a Goblin Chainwhirler here, deals with the egg, and in that way hopes that Tobias doesn't have a way to crew the Harvester or any direct burn spell. But when Tobias blocks with this Egg Elemental,
very bad sign for Francisco.
Very bad, because then you know all that Tobias doesn't want to do here is die this turn, because he probably has direct damage in hand.
Yeah, so that block, just for those of you trying to figure out where we're going with why it's a bad sign for Francisco that he was able to block with that egg token. It's so good to have a Rekindling Phoenix in play that blocking Soulscar Mage, it's the one with prowess. It's the one that if there was a flurry of burn spells could get even better. And this way round, it just meant that Mara a little bit better protected against everything going on the other side of the battlefield. Untaps the exert token going away. That the least of the concerns for Tobias Mara here, because he casts Chandra, and there's the handshake. The little pump fake there from Francisco Sanchez. Big smiles for him. He's had a great weekend, but not quite as great as that man there. Tobias Mara, a quick 2-game set, mono red aggro. Once again, we saw it last weekend. We've seen it this weekend. Tobias Mara with mono red aggro, picking up the trophy. Standard mono red, it turns out, it's just where it's at right now.
Yeah, having those untapped lands is key in the red mirror. Having Hazoret as your disposal, more often attacking with it on turn 4 or 5 is just a key element to winning this matchup, and just that's the way it goes. Yeah,
I mean, it's the sort of thing that, as much as there's potency in having red-black going on, looking at this mono-red list, it's just a well-oiled machine. Very straightforward in terms of mana base, 24 mountains, nice and easy, and then every single step on the curve. Each of these cards is just very powerful indeed, very consistent, and ultimately able to play a long game better than a lot of red decks that we've seen historically. And that means that even if you don't get the super fast starts that maybe might have come from some of these other red decks in the past, these decks are tenacious in seeking down that victory.
Definitely, Tim. There's just a host of different possible threats you can play on each converted mana cost, stand up being as large as this is, and this red deck having as much untapped mana as possible is just taking full advantage of that.
Yeah, and honestly, there are lots of different ways that we could characterize the way the finals went, but to me, the biggest one just came down to the lands.
Right.
Every single occasion that we had the two players in a similar situation in terms of number of lands, Mara was just always ahead because he could always cast all of his spells that had the right converted mana cost. So he was never stuck going, oh, this land comes into play tapped, or, oh, I've had to use energy to cast my first black spell, which means that now I can't cast a Goblin Chain Whirler on time. At every stage in the game, having those basic mountains just meant that he was able to very smoothly transition from early to mid to late game.
Yeah, it might sound like one of the most non-flashy ways you can get ahead on Magic, but this was just a pitch perfect example of how that goes.
Yeah, and it looks like we're going to have to oust you from your seat. Invalid that you may be, I'm afraid that we've got someone else that might want to have a little brief chat with the guys at home, and that is Tobias Mara, our victor here at Grand Prix Copenhagen. He's got a trophy. He's looking quite pleased with himself, as well he should be. So I will bid you adieu, Joel, and we will speak again soon.
Right.
I'm going to give you a hand with these because I've just realised you've only got one, and you might need a little bit of help with that. One person who needs absolutely no help right now, though, is Tobias Mara. Come on down, grab a seat, grab a headset. I'll let you hold on to the trophy. That seems only fair. Fantastic performance there. Mono Red once again doing it again. At what point in that game did you really sort of think, you know what, I might have this?
When I have, when you don't play Chandra's defeat, when I attack with Glorybringer.
Yeah, it's
wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely huge. Chandra's defeat, such a powerful card. I could see that it's still just sort of sinking in. Take a moment, breathe in this moment, because it's the best feeling in the world. You've got the trophy already, and we got a chance to see the power of mono red against red black. All of your lands coming to play untapped, all of your mana always working out. I mean, is that kind of the story of your whole weekend, that even in the matchup where you've been playing against kind of a similar deck, your draws are just always really smooth?
Yeah.
And in terms of the way that your top 8 went, you've obviously also had to play against the blue-white decks. If you had to pick which sort of opponents you prefer to play against more, is it the red matchups all the way, or how do you feel about your other matchups?
I think feel greater with the red matchup.
Well, the red matchups have worked out very well, and of course the red deck has worked out very well. Congratulations, Tobias Mara. Fantastic performance. You are our champion here at Grand Prix Copenhagen.
Thanks a lot.
And we are now all complete here at Grand Prix Copenhagen. We thank you so much for joining us. The standard format, once again, dominated by red decks, but that does not mean to say there's not been other good decks in the room. We've seen Javier Dominguez doing fantastic stuff with blue and white. We've seen a whole host of different decks gradually fighting their way to try and get up to the top, but it is mono red that's got there. From me, Tim Willoughby, Joel Larson, my booth partner, also Riley Knight, Simon Gertsen, behind the scenes, Stephen Leeming, Neil Rigby, Rich Hagen, of course, Max Ogden, everyone that's been working here on coverage. We thank you very much for enjoying the show, and we will see you soon for more magic. But for now, it's good night.